Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of Realpolitik. This is Stanley Johnny, the Hindu's International Affairs Editor. It's been more than a month since Sheikh Hasina, Bangladesh's elected Prime Minister, was forced to resign and leave the country by student protesters, political opposition and the military. Ever since, the Muslim majority South Asian country of 171 million has seen dramatic political and social developments. An interim government headed by Muhammad Yunus, the 2006 Nobel winner for economics, took charge with the backing of the military on August 8th. The country has also seen widespread violence targeting religious minorities, particularly the Hindu community, who make up less than 10% of Bangladesh's population, and leaders and functionaries of the Awami League, Sheikh Hasina's party. Khaleda Zia, Hasina's main political rival and chairperson of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, has been freed and the BNP has emerged as the main political actor. The interim government has removed a ban on the Islamist Jamaat-e-Islami, which has emerged as a second political pillar. Both the BNP and the Jamaat have taken a conciliatory approach towards China and a hostile line towards India. Chinese ambassador in Dhaka had even visited Jamaat leaders who hailed China's role in Bangladesh's development projects. The Yunus administration has also taken a tough line towards India, asking New Delhi to extradite Sheikh Hasina, who is facing multiple cases in Bangladesh. Where is the country headed to? Will there be elections soon? And are the Islamist forces getting strengthened? And what is the future of the Awami League? To discuss the post-Hasina situation in Bangladesh in detail, I'm joined by Smita Sharma, an independent multimedia journalist and a visiting faculty member at the Kautilya School of Public Policy. Smita has just returned from Dhaka after covering the post-Hasina developments in Bangladesh. Thanks for joining us, Smita, and a very warm welcome to Realpolitik. So you just came back from Dhaka. So, to begin with, just take us through what you saw in Bangladesh.
Hi, thanks, Stanley, for having me here in this conversation. And with the disclaimer that unfortunately I wasn't able to travel out of Dhaka, but I did go to Dhaka a couple of days after 5th of August. So what I saw, the impressions were definitely different from the initial chaos and bloodshed reports that were coming in. But as of now, what I can say is that inside Dhaka, things are pretty much back to normal in the sense that your schools, colleges have opened up. The notorious traffic is absolutely back on the streets, and it actually reduces your lifeline by almost 50%. We were walking around late in the night looking for Indian restaurants or Indian food, and that feeling that perhaps there was still that looming sense of threat directly to somebody who was perceived to be or seen as Indian or Hindu. Was it there or not? Clearly, because a lot of it was exaggerated also by the Indian media, and we'll talk about it in just about a bit. Initially, of course, there was that huge threat, but inside Dhaka, it wasn't like there were groups roaming around with machetes. The policemen had joined back. That spirit of rebellion was very much there among the students. So even outside the University of Dhaka, the squares, which had become basically the areas where the students were coalescing when this movement started, they were utilizing it for different kinds of events and different kinds of purposes, including raising funds for those affected in the floods, for which India was very clearly being blamed, on the streets out there. So yes, on the surface of it, it does look like people have gone back, resumed their lives. When we were flying to Dhaka, the flight was full of Indian businessmen, Indian medical students, Kashmiri students who were going into Dhaka because who had left it earlier when, of course, the entire violence erupted. So people are back there. There is an uneasy calm of sorts also with large groups of people, especially with those aligned or affiliated with the Awami League, with media. But things will take a lot of time to settle down politically. There is a huge churning that is happening inside, and for now, it's going to be a while before we actually, get to say that all is well and all is back to business in Bangladesh.
Yeah, saying things are, calming down in Dhaka. But how do you look at the role of the caretaker government? Because on August 8th, Yunus took over as the chief advisor of the Bangladeshi government. And you have a new cabinet. So I have two things to ask you. One, how do you look at the setup of the new government? In a sense, they're talking about inclusion, the participation of women in the government, but at the same time, you also have a leader from the Hifazat, which is outrightly anti-woman and extremist or majoritarian organization. And Yunus talks about changes and bringing in elections on the one side. But on the other side, there are ministers who are saying Bangladesh is not ready for elections, it will take time. So, how do you look at the whole process of transition and the setting of the new caretaker administration led by Mohammad Yunus?
Look, the process of transition is going to be messy. I think nobody will have any doubts about that. It's going to be very challenging. And there are lots of challenges even for this caretaker government in hand. On the face of it, they did seem to be making the right noises. They were doing the right ticks in the boxes. Even when it came to the attacks on minorities, you saw Dr. Muhammad Yunus come out and condemn them. He even visited Dhakeshwari Temple, which is one of the most ancient sites and, a very, very prominent religious site for the Hindus there, where we also went and spoke to a lot of the Bangladeshi Hindus. You even saw Khalida Zia, once she came out of, her house arrest, she also said that you need to stop with these attacks and there has to be inclusion, because secularism inclusion was something at the end of the day which drove the entire 1971 liberation movement to begin with. That
Yeah.
Bengali identity, the linguistic movement that turned into a national political movement and ended up with the partition, of East Pakistan, West Pakistan, and then of course East Pakistan becoming Bangladesh. So that is there. But what I think the good thing is that Dr. Muhammad Yunus does enjoy a broad-based support. He
Okay.
was a name that was popped up by the protesters. And I think it's very important for all of us to recognize and for India to recognize, because there has been a large scale denial that these protests were from the word go sponsored by either a foreign, this belief and this argument that they were essentially a foreign hand or there was nothing genuine about these protests. We need to stop looking at these protests from that prism, because that needs to change. And when you see that, you also realize that these students genuinely put forward these names. There were other names also that were doing the round, including of Shahidul Alam, the photojournalist who had been jailed under the Awami League and Sheikh Hasina's regime for 107 days. But Mohammad Yunus, while he's not a hardcore politician, but he's not politically completely naive at the moment. Of course, he does enjoy a global standing and a global support, which we saw when the Sheikh Hasina regime had slapped almost more than 200 cases against him on charges of corruption in microfinance and all of that with Grameen Bank. He has a very tough job, which essentially starts with, first of all, maintaining law and order. There are still incidents coming in of mob lynching. We've just had, in fact, one of the Awami League students, body leaders, who has been killed by a mob. Apparently, there were some students involved in it, according to reports. While he in Dhaka, things may be calm. There is an uneasy calm, but beyond Dhaka, whether it's Khulna, whether it's Silhet, this has become a multi-layered sort of a cocktail right now. A, there is that element of complete political vengeance. B, there is that element, of course, of religious, hatred or a communal poison that also comes in with the Jamaat being there, with the Hifazat being there. C, there is also the element of law and order, because there are a lot of players locally who are now moving into the space of extortion. They're calling up business houses, they're calling up people and saying that you either pay us bribe or we slap these cases against you, or slap even murder cases against you, or your establishments are burnt down. The fact that the police had to leave their stations because there was a complete loss of trust in them from civil society, who they thought was actually aligned with Sheikh Hasina and were the reason behind the firing that claimed so many lives that are being investigated right now. They lost their brothers, their friends, their family members in these protests, especially after between 16th July to 5th of August, all the entire killings that have happened. Very, very unfortunate and heartbreaking. So for Mohammad Yunus, I think, he will have to do basically that balancing act right now of obviously trying to show that it's Bangladesh first, it's Bangladesh's dignity and self-respect first, that he needs to be treated as equals by everybody, more importantly, including India. At the same time, he also realizes the fact that he needs to reach out to neighbors because Bangladesh's economy is staggering right now. It's definitely not the glossy story that Sheikh Hasina had painted, and which the whole world was looking at and appreciating for a very, very long time. So he cannot. I think we need to realize that he also cannot overlook these elements that are there. I mean, if Jamaat in 1971, Jamaat was a different story. But the
Yeah.
fact is that Jamaat did become a political movement in Bangladesh after some years, and particularly after Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's killing. I
Yeah.
mean, Jamaat has roots there. So if they are wanting to come back into the government, he would perhaps have to keep everybody here. But is it just one party that is calling the shots right now? I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't agree with that. That it's only BNP and Jamaat which is actually calling the shots through the interim government. I think
Yeah.
Yunus is also struggling to find his way in here to see, because the bigger challenge for him at the end of the day will be to hold those elections in a free and fair manner, which at the
Yeah.
end of the day were the reasons that primarily triggered so much of anger on the streets when people thought that their voices had been clamped down upon election after election.
Yeah. See, you said you talked to members of the Hindu community in Bangladesh. What was the feedback you got from them? I'm asking this because there were a lot of reports about, targeted attacks against the Hindus after Hasina fell, and there were concerns about racial profiling, and then reports about Hindu public servants being forced to resign, etc., etc. So, what is the general feedback you got from the community?
See, I tell you what, I spoke to a wide spectrum of people from the community, even though it was within Dhaka, and random people, people on the streets that I was talking to, also people who are in media, people who are in important positions of authority. I think it's important that as news organizations, we first of all put out some of the factual claims out there. Because what happened initially was after 4th, 5th August, when a lot of the Indian mainstream television media houses went in there were reports that came in which almost looked like there were mass killings of Hindus that had happened. Those reports made it sound like that. Now, that is incorrect. And that has been also factually checked by a lot of international organizations, including the BBC, which has also done extremely critical reports, for which it
Yeah.
has faced flack from, the Sheikh Hasina government, which it actually, and from other governments too. They did go out, they did try and check into these claims. And in terms of the killings, I can tell you that the people from the Hindu communities who are either in charges of the temples or who are leading newsrooms, who are living under fear, no doubt, who have a whole amount of worries and concerns to deal with, they themselves are saying at the moment, in fact, the number of killings that we are looking at is anywhere between 4 to 7. The
Yeah.
Indian diplomatic sources are saying that the numbers are around 11, but there is that degree of sifting that also they themselves are doing, whether it's essentially because they were Hindu or whether because they were aligned with the Awami League. But in terms of, and of course, every single killing is absolutely condemnable. Without, I mean, no single killing should happen because of somebody's religious
Yeah.
identity.
Yeah.
But in terms of the attacks on businesses, houses, yes, it did happen. I mean, as many as at least the human rights organizations have said that at least 500 assaults did happen on houses, on religious places. There were cases of businesses and shops that were burnt down, which were owned by the Bangladeshi Hindus. Having said that, is there a situation of every Bangladeshi Hindu right now wanting a way out, wanting a refuge into India? I would say no. That's not the case.
Yeah.
There are, of course, people who did move towards. We saw the images come in from the Beniapol Petrapol border in particular, who were wanting to come in. And it's not just Hindus. So even the other minority communities, for instance, Christians or the Buddhists, their temples have also been, their worship places have also been attacked. And Bangladesh has had a checkered past when it comes to its relationship with the minorities, which has been frail and fragile over since its liberation itself. It has been a chaotic, in fact, checkered history, something which is very common in the subcontinent, which has borne these scars of and the traumas of partition. So whether it's India, whether it's Pakistan, whether it's Bangladesh, wherever you've had a sharp majority minority divide, we have seen these scars play out in violent ways every now and then. And so the Hindu establishments have come under attack. In terms of killings, the numbers are definitely way, way, way lower than that has been exaggerated. But I think the problem is that every time you bring up the Bangladeshi Hindu issue there now in Bangladesh, whether it's young students, whether it's people on the streets, they actually turn around and say, do you have the moral authority to talk about our minorities? And that is a problem, Stanley, which I think does need certain amount of introspection too.
Right, right. Yeah. So, the elephant in the room is the military. So I don't think that Yunus would have been able to consolidate power or set up his special administration without support from the military. But when you are there, when you witnessed the transition or the new government taking shape, what role the military is actually playing in politics now? Behind the scene or active? Did you see the hands? Or what did you observe?
It's largely behind the scene right now.
Yeah,
Wakaruzaman, in fact, is actually even related to Sheikh Hasina, I think, by way of marriage into the family.
marriage. Yeah, yeah,
And the turnaround movement in the pro movement did actually happen when the military essentially conveyed to Sheikh Hasina in categorical terms that, look, we are not going to shoot at the protesters. And this was in the run up to 4th August and 5th August, when the protesters had decided to start marching on towards Gano Bhavan, Sheikh Hasina's official residence. We saw all those images of plunder and of assault there. And they basically said that we are not going to shoot at the protesters. And, already too many lives had been lost. A lot of it was also, in fact, unleashed because of violence. We heard a lot of student accounts and reports of how the Awami League student protesters, student league, had allegedly entered dormitories, hostels, attacked women, female students as well, and then how the sort of protests turned violent, which it wasn't when it started initially over the quota issues. So the Bangladesh military, I think, a lot of people in India, when they ask this question, of course, also there is that underlying assumption that is this a military coup? Um and perhaps trying to draw parallels with Pakistan all the time. So I do feel that there is a difference, that this is not a military coup. What Bangladesh has seen in the past. You've also seen that between 75 to 77, or when General Ziaur Rahman, Khalida Zia's late husband, was in power. He was called the first military dictator of Bangladesh. So it's not that kind of a situation where the military is calling the day-to-day shots right now. I think there is substantial amount of trust in Yunus right now to lead things in a certain way. The military here is not trying to essentially ensure that there are no elections in the country for the longest time now. And it's interesting also to recall, I think, in 2008, because 2006 8, yeah, when the controversial elections had happened and when Sheikh Hasina sort of was able to make a comeback. It was
yeah.
because then the military had played a very important role in cleaning up the rolls, in cleaning up the bogus voters, in making sure that the election process happened and the people had a fair sort of a stake in the election process, and political parties, including the Awami League, were able to fight, come back, contest, and win, and then stay in power for a long time. So its inherent nature as of today, the Bangladeshi military, I would say, is different from Pakistan military. It's not really the ones that is propping up, if I may use the word, characters at this point in time. It's watching from behind the scenes, but it has a very, very important role, especially when it comes to, because when the scenes turned chaotic, when policemen left, even in terms of law and order, I mean, people were calmed down only when they saw the military starting to take a little bit of responsibility and starting to play a role. So I would think that at this moment they are in a wait and watch mode to give enough time to this interim government to see how they go about, and whether they are able to do the course corrections necessary when it comes to holding those elections. But before that, you'll have a lot of mess and chaos to deal with. Stanley, particularly when it comes to the investigations into these killings, and the International Crime Tribunal,
Yeah.
whose chief prosecutor is again a controversial man, Tajul Islam, because he's somebody who has defended most of the people of the Jamaat-e-Islami, and he, in
Yeah.
fact, also became the joint convener of one of the offshoots of that of Jamaat-e-Islami later on. So he is
Yeah.
seen as partisan, and he's been brought in as chief prosecutor. So I think
Yeah.
the institutional structures and their strength is going to be a very big challenge in the hands of Yunus right now, if they really want to ensure that Bangladesh has a new future and not really much of the old in just new bottles.
Correct. And let's shift towards foreign policy before we wind up this discussion. You see, Now Yunus himself is seen to have taken a hard line towards India because, especially because Sheikh Hasina is currently in India. And if you listen to BNP or Jamaat leaders, they also ask India to extradite Sheikh Hasina back to Bangladesh, where she is facing a lot of cases. And on the other side, last week you saw the Chinese ambassador meeting the Jamaat leaders and actually hailing the transition, whereas the Jamaat leaders were praising China's role in Bangladesh's development. Most of the Western countries, including the United States and the United Kingdom, have welcomed the transition and supported the Yunus administration. So, how do you look at the foreign policy outlook of the transition government? Because, on the face of it, this is a massive geopolitical setback for India because we had enjoyed great relationship with Sheikh Hasina and the Awami League. Now, Hasina is out of the country; she is in India. Awami League is out of power. There is a transitional government, and it's possible that the BNP could be back in power. So, how do you look at this? This changes from a foreign policy point of view or from India's interests.
See, for India, I think there is no doubt that this is a setback. And I think there is also no doubt that we were caught unawares, about the ground shifting beneath Hasina's feet. Or if we were aware, then we were clearly living in denial of what was happening. Let me just share something with you, Stanley, because and I was trying to dig into this question again and again as to why this entire, anger and hatred towards Sheikh Hasina is translating into an anti-India sentiment, into an anti-Mr. Modi sentiment. And you could see that even when this flood donation campaign that I was talking about, there were slogans on the wall that basically said that the floods caused by India. Even the sensible intellectual voices are using very strong words to say that, look, we feel like India has been trying to destabilize Bangladesh. Very strong allegations coming in from voices otherwise who have been reasonable all this while, and perhaps India has engaged with. And some of the events that they've been pointing to constantly in terms of what really fed into this anger, the fact that in G20, you saw Prime Minister Modi there, these images with Sheikh Hasina and Joe Biden. And this is just few months before the elections, where it almost looked like India was trying to be that interlocutor and the bridge between the two countries, where the Americans had all had a very hostile, in fact, view of Bangladesh, under Sheikh Hasina. They'd even cancelled off the visas, citing the elections and stuff. And secondly, I think Dr. Jaishankar made some statements just on the eve of Bangladeshi elections, where he literally backed, in fact, the government there. These statements, why they, with the opinion makers and with the elite people, whether it's in media, academia, the scholars as well, they didn't go down well. For the common people, if you remember, during Mr. Modi's visit, there were also very strong, in fact, anti-CAA protests that had led to rioting, that had led to killings as well. There are these sensitive, emotive issues of the Tista water sharing, which has also been, of course, whipped up every now and then by anybody who wants to basically score a point with India. So I'm not saying that it's always justifiable anger. A lot of it is also, when you have chaos, when you have a political vacuum, there are people who will come and fish into troubled waters. And that's going to happen. It's not like it will stop happening. With the Chinese, I do feel, though, my reading is, and it could be different, Sandy, China really go well. You've also written books about the Chinese involvements and stuff. My reading is that the Chinese actually are not a fan of chaos. They literally work with anybody who's in power as long as their contracts are coming through, their money is coming through. So
And they
for
move
them,
fast.
yeah,
They move fast.
they move fast, whether it's Sri Lanka, whether it's Nepal. We have seen that. We have seen their ambassadors do that in all these countries. And South Asia has really gone through a whole amount of economic, political sort of changes in these past few years. You've had regime changes. You've had people forced to flee. Before Sheikh Hasina, it was Gotabaya Rajapaksa in Sri Lanka. And today, if you see the turn of events, Rajapaksa is actually back in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is going to the polls on 21st of September. Ranil Wickremesinghe, a cat with 9 lives, was leading the parliament. So, in terms of foreign policy, I think there is a huge anger amongst the youth, amongst people, ordinary people, that India needs to recognize. India needs to admit to begin with, because this is our biggest problem and our challenge with Bangladesh. It was a stable story for us in the neighborhood compared to all the other stories, whether it's Maldives, Myanmar, Nepal, Afghanistan, Pakistan, obviously. So there, this feeling, I think the MEA spokesperson's statement that Bangladesh is the interest of the people of Bangladesh is foremost on our minds. I
Yeah.
personally feel that could have come in earlier. What you
Right.
did see for the first few days play out was actually even actively retired diplomats taking to television sets and constantly dissing out these protests, not wanting to admit even for 1 second that they could be genuine, that at some point in time they could have been spurred by other factors, but that the movement did start off as a genuine civil society students movement. So that denial of acceptance hasn't gone down well with people out there, with ordinary people out there. And we really need to, in terms of foreign policy, look, we've built so much of infrastructure connectivity in the last 10 years or 15 years, whether it's buses, rails, inland water transport, increasing the number of medical visas, the tourism has gone up. These things are good stories. These are people to people stories. The communication has perhaps not been played down well on these stories, but there is that genuine anger against India, against Mr. Modi. I think that India needs to be conscious of that image that you have only invested in one leader and one party, that you have not been seen. I mean, maybe our think tanks could have invited some of the opposition leaders from the BNP over the years when you have these conclaves that have the blessings of the government to come and present their views. If the past two elections were controversial and these elections were termed as dummy in Bangladesh, the feeling that people there have is that basically Sheikh Hasina was able to be in that position because of India's blessings and support. So
Yeah.
we will need rectification of that in terms of our own foreign policy course change. Also look at it through a regional prism of how the entire region is undergoing a constant overwhelming change, and not just look at it from the bilateral lens really, because it does need a regional approach as well when it comes to these kind of complications. But in terms of foreign policy, of course, you will have Pakistan, with its own interests, hoping that the Jamaat is able to pop up candidates in the next elections, and that we have more political support. You will have the Americans also. Obviously, the Americans have already reached out to Yunus, and I think, yeah, there was a story in the Daily Star that they are looking at the economic rebuilding and looking at all kinds of things, and perhaps a delegation coming into Dhaka soon. People are moving in fast.
Yeah.
But for India, I think we need to basically right now uh, lie low, but at the same time, essentially send out the message that whatever the people want in Bangladesh, we are there with you. The problem area will begin when, of course, Bangladesh makes a formal request for possible extradition of Sheikh Hasina. But before that, Dr. Yunus has already requested India for a meeting along the sidelines of the UNGA, which ideally, in my humble opinion, I would think that Mr. Modi should look at a possible meeting there.
Yeah. Maybe we should send feelers that we are ready to stay engaged with Bangladesh. Yeah.
Yes, it's not that we are not engaged. I mean, people are talking, back channel talks
Okay.
are happening, even with BNP. Of course, Jamaat is a very strict sort of a no-go area even right now. Maybe that will have to change, or some recalibration will have to happen. But this is a serious image problem that India has to deal with right now. That India was seen as the largest and the sole backer of Sheikh Hasina, that kept her in power when people were suffering because of income inequality, because of corruption, because of enforced disappearances, the allegations that there was an Aina Ghar or House of Mirrors, that people were being actually picked up from the streets because they were dissenting or kept, the allegations of murder of individuals that have happened. These are serious allegations against a political leader. I mean, I'm not ruling away the fact that after some years, maybe we'll see Sheikh Hasina back in Bangladesh, or maybe it's after some months, as and when elections happen. But at the moment, these are very serious allegations. And if India was picking up these notes, through its mission, through its people, diplomats and agents, and if it was a trusted ally and a friend, maybe they should have had these conversations at least within closed doors.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Smita, for joining Realpolitik. Maybe we will continue this conversation in another episode of this show. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me, Stanley.
So, Bangladesh is moving towards a new future. Muhammad Yunus seems to be consolidating power, and he enjoys the support of all political actors as of now, including the military and the political parties such as Jamaat-e-Islami and BNP. But at the same time, he faces bigger challenges, including fixing the economy and building relationship with Bangladesh's partners. For India, The fall of Sheikh Hasina was a big foreign policy setback, but at the same time, India is cautiously watching what is unfolding in Bangladesh. Thanks for watching Realpolitik. For more such videos, please subscribe to The Hindu.